everyone assumed Queen Elizabeth II left her jewelry the way she left everything else, carefully, formally divided by protocol and bloodline. But that is not what happened. Buried inside decades of private correspondence in one quietly worded instruction to her senior dresser, there was a single piece the Queen set aside years before her death with one name attached to it and one name only. Not Camilla, not Anne, Kate. And once you understand why she chose this specific object for this specific woman, the entire story of how the monarchy plans to survive the next 50 years starts to make sense. If you find this kind of royal detective work as addictive as we do, hit subscribe now because we are about to open a part of the vault most royal channels don't even know exists. Let's start with the object itself because its origin is stranger than people expect. In 1893, Queen Mary received a wedding gift from the county of Lincolnshire, a delicate diamond tiara built around a design she had personally sketched, featuring 9 interlocking arches instead of the usual spikes or scrolls. It was nicknamed, almost affectionately, the Lincolnshire Arches. Unlike most tiaras of its era, it was designed to be low and soft against the head rather than tall and commanding, which made it unusual for a woman as famously severe as Queen Mary. For most of the 20th century, this tiara barely left the vault. When it passed to Elizabeth in 1953, she wore it exactly once for a formal portrait sitting that was never even released to the public. Palace insiders at the time noted that the Queen found the piece, in her own words, too soft for the crowd. Her reign demanded a visual language of strength and permanence, arches and scrolls that photographed like architecture, not lace. A tiara designed to look gentle simply didn't serve the image she was building for a nation still rebuilding itself. So it slept. Through the 60s, through the 70s, through Diana's entire tenure, the Lincolnshire Arches never once touched a royal head. Then, in early 2022, something changed. Buckingham Palace's inventory records, quietly updated that year, moved the tiara out of the general collection and into what insiders call the personal reserve, a small number of pieces the Queen kept direct control over until her death. Royal jewelry historian Leslie Field has noted that pieces moved into that reserve were almost always destined for a specific recipient chosen years in advance. The Lincolnshire Arches had just found its person 3 years before the world would ever see it on her. If the tiara tells us the Queen was already planning ahead, the next piece tells us exactly who she was planning for. In 1957, during a state visit to Paris, President Charles de Gaulle presented the young Queen with a brooch unlike anything else in the collection, a cluster of sapphires shaped like a 5-petal flower, made by the French house Molerio Ditzmeller rather than a British jeweler. It was a genuine diplomatic gift, and diplomatically, the Queen had to accept it. Privately, she rarely wore it. French designs of that era leaned romantic and asymmetric, while the Queen's personal taste, especially in brooches, ran toward British symmetry, something structured enough to anchor a coat on a windy tarmac. The de Gaulle sapphire sat in a drawer for the better part of 6 decades. Then, in November 2021, the Queen loaned it, not to Anne, not to Camilla, but to Catherine for a state visit that, notably, involved a French delegation. Some royal watchers believe the timing was a deliberate signal, using a diplomatic gift on a diplomatic occasion to show the world exactly which royal woman the Queen trusted with representing Britain abroad. Whether or not that theory is confirmed, the fact remains that the sapphire had waited 64 years for its first real outing, and it chose Catherine's lapel to finally have one. 2 pieces in, and already a pattern is forming. But the next item is where the story stops being about taste and starts being about legacy. In 1947, the year of Elizabeth's own wedding, her father, King George VI, commissioned a bracelet from Boucheron, a slim band of baguette diamonds meant to be a private, almost sentimental gift from a father giving his daughter away. Unlike the grander state jewels, this bracelet was never meant for cameras. Elizabeth wore it once, on her wedding day, tucked beneath her sleeve where no photograph ever caught it, and then, according to her longtime dresser Angela Kelly's own memoir, she put it away and rarely discussed it again. For 70 years, the Boucheron bracelet existed almost as a private memory rather than a public jewel, technically part of the collection, but functionally invisible. That changed in May 2023, weeks after the coronation, when Catherine was photographed wearing it during a private family engagement. An event with no formal dress code, no tiara, nothing that demanded jewelry at all. Because there was no diplomatic reason to wear it and no state occasion requiring it, historians who tracked these loans read the choice as intensely personal, less an accessory and more an inheritance, a father's gift to a daughter, now quietly handed to the daughter of the next generation. That single decision, made without press coverage, without a formal announcement, might be the clearest evidence of what the Queen actually wanted for the future of this family. And it leads directly to the final wish itself. In the last 2 years of her life, the Queen made 3 specific, documented instructions to her private secretary regarding items to be set aside outside the normal line of royal inheritance. 2 of them were minor, personal keepsakes for her great-grandchildren. The third was the Lincolnshire Arches tiara with an instruction that it be reserved, in writing, for use by the Princess of Wales, not the future Queen Consort in the abstract, but Catherine specifically, by name. That detail alone separates this from ordinary royal jewelry loans, which are typically informal arrangements made loan by loan. This was something closer to a will. Why would a monarch who spent her entire 70-year reign projecting strength choose, at the very end, to formally hand over the one tiara she considered too soft to wear? Because a final wish is never really about the object. It's about what the object is allowed to become in someone else's hands. Elizabeth built a monarchy out of armor, out of arches that photographed like fortresses and jewels, heavy enough to anchor a nation's certainty. But she seemed to understand in her last years that the monarchy Catherine will eventually lead cannot survive on armor alone. It will need softness that still holds its shape, arches gentle enough to be loved and strong enough to last, and she chose, quietly, deliberately, years in advance, exactly who should be the one to prove that both can exist in the same crown.